Thank you for joining this session. As we heard earlier, data matters, yeah? And so we knew that. But perhaps what we want to discuss in this session is how data and eventually the data strategy and the data spaces matter for the public administrations in order to be able to provide better services and make better decisions and become even more optimize their processes. In the Commission, as you will all know, we have had a huge number of different policies and strategies on data over the past 2-3 years. The data strategy, which introduced the idea of data spaces, the Data Governance Act, which tries to identify how best to share also public data that is not open, the Data Act, which identifies data sharing in the public sector and public sector sharing some data with the public sector under certain conditions, the high-value data sets and so on. And all this actually shows us that there is indeed a paradigm shift. Those of you who have been following the digital transformation of public administrations, we've gone through the idea of, yes, administrations share data among themselves to provide better services. And then we had this whole new paradigm of open data. Let's rush and open up our data, and let's see what happens, and who will actually pick up that data, and what kind of big innovation will happen. And then what we realized is that, yes, opening up data is one thing, but actually many of the data sets that public administrations would really need is not necessarily those that are held by the administration itself or are easily up for opening them up. They're actually data that is all around the ecosystem, that is perhaps held by private entities. And so this is kind of how we moved into this whole new idea of data sharing and how the data spaces actually start making sense also for the public administrations as well. As you know, many ideas have come forward on where data spaces could emerge in important sectors, mobility, health, the Green Deal, and so on. And many of those have a relevance for the public administrations as well. So I'm really, really pleased that today I have on our panel an amazing group of experts from all different fields. As you heard, several of them from the Data Spaces Support Center, all representing a very important organization dealing with data and data spaces. We also have someone from a national administration working on data, and we also have someone who actually creates new innovative solutions for the data spaces themselves. So we have a very nice story to tell. And to start that story, I have asked each of them to actually give a short presentation on how they see interoperability and data spaces and what their role or what their experience has been so far in terms of interoperability for data spaces. So let me introduce them in the order of how they will come up and give their short pitches. So I'm very, very pleased to welcome here Carlos Alonso Peña, who is the director of the Data Office Division at the State Secretariat for Digitization and AI in Spain. Thank you very much, Carlos, for being with us. Silva Castelvi, who is the Director for Research and Standardization from the International Data Space Association. Clara Pezuela, who is the VP for Funded Programs at the Fireware Foundation. Christoph Lange, there you are, Head of Department for Data Science and AI at Fraunhofer Institute for Applied Information Technologies. Harry Ketamo, who is the founder and chairman of Head AI. And Gianfranco Cecconi, who is Senior Director at Capgemini Invent. And as you all know, so Capgemini, Fireware, Fraunhofer, and the International Data Space Association are members of the Data Spaces Support Center, which is a key group of organizations trying to bring forward the data spaces that have been launched through European Commission funding over the past year. So I would then actually hand it over to you, Carlos, to tell us about your experience in the Spanish administration about data. Maybe it's easier if you go there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be part of this distinguished panel discussing a topic about interoperability, but we are going to talk about interoperability between data space. Interoperability, as we all know, is a big It's a key piece that enables data to flow freely, efficiently, and securely between different systems, organizations, and even nations. In the previous panels, we have talked about interoperability, but in the public sector, or with a flavor of public sector. When we talk about data space, it's not public sector only. We have the private sector. And today, I would like to share a few insights from the Spanish Data Space Deployment Action Plan, where we can see that interoperability and the interconnection between data space is a key piece. The Data Office Division is the unit in charge of streamlining the management, sharing, and use of data through all productive sectors of the Spanish economy and society. Not only public sector, we are involved with private sector too. Europe has, as Andrea has said, has among its strategic objectives the creation of a single European data market. The Data Office deploys these objectives, or we try to deploy these objectives in Spain, supporting the development of data space and the achievement of strategic digital sovereignty. What is the vehicle that we have think that is the correct to deploy this strategy, data space? The key word is data space, no? In this data space, we promote innovation, advance the generation of shared value. We have developed an action plan to deploy this data space in Spain. In this plan, we have 5 objectives, and these are the objectives that we have in mind. No? Improving the performance of strategic productive sectors, promote the generation of new solutions and business models based on data and artificial intelligence, guarantee of strategic digital autonomy, ensure our national capacity to provide and control critical technologies for digitalization, promotion of the generation of quality data. We have talked previously about the importance of the data, ensure the quality of data through its ethical, we have talked a little bit about the ethical, and effective governance. Governance is a key word too. Enhancement of public data, maximize the value of public data, promoting its accessibility and use. I believe that all have clear that when we talk about data space, we are not talking about open data. Open data are important part of the data space, but data space are not open data. And the last objective is promoting a fair and sustainable data economy. Promote an equitable environment in the use of data and ensure the equitable distribution of benefits generated by data. We have these action plans. When we talk, we have centered in 3 different parts. The first part talks about the concept of data space, the context, characteristics, dimensions, functionality, the governance, how to organize different architectures. And in the second part, we talk about the strategic axis with the objectives, the strategic axis and measures that later I'm going to talk. And later we have a few insights about how to deploy this data space in the practice. No? We talk about the importance of the quality, perspective on privacy, licensing of open data that appears in this data space, the interconnection of data space, and a decalogue of requirements to consider. When we talk about data space, and I believe that this slide is very useful, we talk more than bilateral exchange of information. And perhaps we can talk about data space when we move from the left to the right. In the second scenario of sharing information, that is the centralized scenario, we have an organization that put all the data together. It's similar to a data lake. In the third scenario, we have a marketplace. With this data that we have, I do a market, I do a business with them. And when we talk about the European Common Data Space, we talk about the 4th and the 5th scenario. The 4th scenario is when you have a community of different actors that share the data. We have providers, we have consumers, we have data intermediaries, and we have all the needs that I need to develop this data space. And the fifth scenario is when different data spaces interconnect between them, because I can't mix the data from different data spaces. I believe that's important to have this in mind when we talk about data space. The objective at the end is to create a data market, guarantor of the exchange of sectorial or intersectorial information. But we are not going to do in Spain in a monolithic way, through a single platform, but rather on the basis of interconnecting, federating different initiatives, each of which address challenges and concrete solutions. As you can see in the figure, one data space at the end could be a node when integrated with other data spaces. As I have talked previously, we have this development action plan. In this development action plan, we have the strategic objectives that I have talked previously, and we have strategic ACEs and measures that we can see in the horizontal lines. I'm going to talk about this very briefly. The strategic ACEs are for example, enable elements of viability and sustainability. And we have measures to generation of market conditions, search for social and territorial cohesion, community formation, interoperability guarantee, independent of the technological solution, deployment of experimental laboratory. The second X is trustworthy data governance, establishment of governance frameworks, security and confidentiality, assessment of organizational maturity, improve the data quality of the data exchange. The third X is driving efforts in key sectors, targeted support for industrial sectors, response to social challenges. And at the end is the measures that are related with the determinant role of public administration, involvement in sector deployment, mobilization of the value of public data, value captured by public administration, and public administration is an example. With this plan in mind, we have developed a set of activities related with the deployment of this data space. We have developed projects led by regions. That is what we call the RETEC projects. We have projects with the council. That is what we call the EDINT project. We have a subsidy, nominative subsidy, to support the activities of the Spanish national hub of Gaia X. We have support the development of basic security and sovereign technology, in this case with the university. We have nominative subsidy for the development of activities around the language. We are developing, in this case, with the SGAT, the National Health Data Space. We have the public sector data space that we are developing. And related with the tourism data space, we have developed the Smart Tourism Destination Platform. We leadership the support action CCA data space tourism date, and we have developed an ontology from the tourism. And at the end, we have participated in the EDIC, this European project to give sustainability in time for strategic projects in the digital decade, and in this case from mobility, giving continuity to the European Federated Project and the Spanish Simple Logistic Project. As you see, we have a lot of initiatives, and the key is the interconnection between these initiatives, that we don't repeat different silos of information, no? In this case, it's clear that the governance is important. Effective data governance at each participant in a data space is essential to adequately provide and consume the data being exchanged. In this case, from the data office division, we have help to publish standards to the governance of the data. When we don't talk about an organization and how to govern the data in the organization, we talk about the governance in the data space. Technical, semantical, organizational, and legal interoperability must be ensured through adequate data space governance performance. Here we can see, or I believe that in the panel we are going to see that there are many unanswered questions about the governance and regulation of data space. And at the end, the long-term goal that is pursued by the European strategy is the interconnection between these different data spaces. And I would like to finish with two answer questions that perhaps later we can answer, no? What lessons can we learn from the performance of open data, INSPIRE, and the Interoperability Interoperable framework? And can we use the power of artificial intelligence, the large language models, the generative AI, to solve the problems that we face when we talk about interoperability in data space? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thanks a lot for, please, I really hope that, thank you. The example of Spain is inspirational for many other member states. We heard earlier that several member states are looking into creating data spaces, and we heard that obviously interoperability is a challenge to create individual data spaces. You mentioned tourism or health and public administrations. And what we would like to look into today is actually how do we move forward? Last year's SEMIC conference also had a session, for those of you who were there, on data spaces, and we just touched upon the idea of interoperability or interconnecting data spaces. And as you said, it's the future, it's the next phase. How do we ensure interoperability within, but essentially among the data spaces, so we can truly create this big European data space? And therefore, I'm really pleased to have the experts here who are working with the Data Spaces Support Center and see the number of different data spaces emerging and looking into really the role of interoperability and looking at, do we have or can we have some reusable tools, solutions that could be beneficial for those data spaces, so we don't reinvent the wheel each time, but then can be reused for, as you also said, for identification, trust, and semantics. As you know, also our unit has developed quite a number of potential solutions that can be helpful for especially data spaces in the public sector. So with that note, I'd like to ask you, Silvia, to tell us from your point of view in the International Data Spaces Association and as part of the Data Spaces Support Center, how do you see the role of interoperability for data spaces? Please, the floor is yours. Yeah, maybe. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, for this opportunity to explain what we are doing at International Data Space Association. Let's see. Yeah. Here. So we have tried to summarize in one slide. So what you see here is our core pillars. So International Data Space Association was founded by Fraunhofer more than 6-7 years ago, maybe. Because in Germany they identified the need of secure data sharing to keep the sovereignty of the data when we share data, because as it was told this morning, we are trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist because the companies doesn't share sensitive data. They keep by their own. So what we are trying to do with data spaces, with data sovereignty, is provide a standard way to share data in a secure way to control the data. We can talk. But what is important is to achieve interoperability. So you can see here that we, as IDSA, and in the association, with the collaboration of our members, we are developing core pillars to support that. The reference architecture to provide guidelines how to implement, how to design the data spaces to keep this sovereignty, interoperability. And after defining these guidelines, we have the first implementations. You can see here ecosystems implementing this reference architecture in mobility data space, Catena-X, but also smart supply chain network, and also by data or EONA-X. And this is not all, because you have identified that there are in Europe different initiatives with different purpose, all of them contributing to the data spaces such as FIWARE that we have on the stage, and we'll explain later how they contribute. Also, Gaia-X commented before, my data. So we have supported all together the convergence of this initiative to approach to deliver one common and standardized way, and this is the mission of Data Space Support Center that Gianfranco will explain later. But that's not enough, because what we are doing is for going to the market, and going to the market means that we are not just Europe, we are international. So from IDSA, we are working also with other countries such as China and Japan, United States, but also to achieve a standardized way to make it at international level. So for this reason, we are working with standardization bodies such as W3C, ISO standards to standardize the way to deploy and implement data spaces. And if you go, for example, on our page, and very sure DSSC will publish a radar where you can find all the initiatives, use cases, and data spaces implementation. Okay, and what is related, how we can contribute to the interoperability? We can talk later, but very briefly, based on the new interoperable, European interoperable framework, we see these 4 layers that propose a very good, interesting approach how to achieve interoperability. And what you can see here from data spaces is that we need an integrated governance for data spaces. The governance, it has been mentioned before, it's very important. We need the governance at the 4 layers, from technical to legal. But then we realize that there is one part of these layers that should be implemented by the participant of the data space. We are talking about how to achieve the technical interoperability, and here we can contribute with the data space protocol to achieve a common technical interoperability, also implementing connectors, for example, the Eclipse data space connector, but also FIWARE connector, and many other different connectors that are available on the market to provide solutions. But on top of that, we need to identify how to understand each other, how to negotiate the policies, the rules to be interoperable. This is the role of the data space authority in a centralized or decentralized architecture. And here we have a lot of challenge to cover the semantics, and Christoph can explain better later. And on top of that, when we create this community that Carlos explained before, we need to organize each other between us. And here we provide a guideline with the rule book. And on top of that, of course, we need contract, we need legal framework. Okay, this is also a challenge to how to implement and also how to automatize the contracts and the agreements. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think it was excellent that basically you responded to the question of Carlos, how can we inspire ourselves from the EIF? And basically you've gone through the different layers of the European Interoperability Framework, looking at how important they are for data spaces. And I'm really glad you picked out also semantics, which is the topic of this conference. So with that, I'd like to ask you, Clara, to explain a little bit how FIWARE contributes to interoperability of data spaces.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I would like to bring the position of the FIWARE Foundation. FIWARE Foundation is a non-profit association with a mission to promote open standards and open source technologies for interoperability and trust, mainly for digital twins and for data spaces. And data interoperability, I'm trying to push, okay, no, this is the last one. Okay, so the data interoperability is at the core of the foundation from the very beginning. So what we understand as is essential for the data exchange of the data sharing is to speak the same language. And when we are talking about speak the same language, we are talking about having the same vocabulary, sharing the same words, and also sharing the same grammar. So we are in this way working in two different directions. One on the syntax of the grammar in order to speak the same language. For that, we are using NGS-ILD, which is a Next Generation Services Interface, linked data standard, promoted and endorsed by ETSI through the group of the Context Information Management. And this is a powerful REST API, which is allowing the access to data in the right time. And we are one of the implementations of this standard under the foundation, which is the Orion LD Context Broker, and other members of the community are also implementing different implementations of this standard. So through this, you can exchange and share data using the same grammar, the same messages in order to exchange data. On the other hand, if we want to speak on the same terms, on the same vocabularies, we have our repository of smart data models together with other initiatives like TM Forum, which is called Smart Data Models. We have more than 1,200 data models in 13 domains and 7 languages, contributed by more than 100 organizations. It's a very way of creating agile, standardized data models by consensus of the different organizations that are using these data models, providing different use cases in different domains like smart cities, energy, water, whatever. So we are relying on commonly used standards for data models. And with these two elements, we are also contributing to the implementation of MIMS, which is the Minimal Interoperable Mechanisms promoted by Living.eu movement. Concretely, NGSI is responding to the MIM 2 and the Smart Data Models to the MIM 1, which is about data models. So in relation to data spaces, so FIWARE is mainly working in the 4 activities in relation to that. So first of all, I think that Silvia has already mentioned, we are together with GaiaX, VDVA and IDSA in the Data Space Business Alliance. This is an alliance of these 4 organizations or associations that join forces in order to come up with a minimal viable implementation of technology for data spaces. So in this way, the 4 initiatives are putting together complementary assets, complementary instruments to provide this implementation as taken as a reference for anyone that wants to implement a data space. It's reflected in this document, Technical Convergence version 2, available in the website. So the second activity, already mentioned, we are members as well of the Data Spaces Support Center. This is a support action that is in charge of coordinating and supporting all the common European data spaces. And here we are leading some activities in this project and providing instruments to the data spaces in order to set up and deploy these data spaces. We have also a proper implementation and our own implementation of how to deploy, how to engage a data space, which is called the Data Space Connector. It's a suite of components that every data space participant can download and install, deploy locally in order to be engaged into a data space, and is fully compliant with the Data Spaces Business Alliance technical convergence. And finally, the 4th activity is by example. We have more than 30 experiments in the context of the I4Trust project of different use cases of data spaces. So here we have deployed some of the elements that have been developed under the connector and under the Data Space Business Alliance, and we have put them in place into concrete experiments in order to illustrate how to make it work in real scenarios. So, which are the lessons learned that we have learned from the previous experience? So first, that we need to agree on a common language that implies having common data models and common exchange APIs, that we need to reach at a certain point an agreement on common standards, or otherwise to find alternative means that we can comment later on through artificial intelligence. And it's important moving from the theory to the reality. So we, let's say, support using things that are already adopted by the market, do not trying to reinvent the wheel every time, and rely on existing and proven solutions, because we have examples that things that have been working. And just questions for the discussion. Should we find the interoperability by enforcement or by consensus? Why we have been using open data during a long time ago, and it's not really a true driver of interoperability? How can artificial intelligence support in the convergence of the amount of exchange APIs that are currently? And which are the cybersecurity challenges faced by the data spaces? Because we are talking a lot about trust in data spaces, but not so much on cybersecurity. So this is my 2 cents for the conversation today.
Thank you, and thank you so much. Thanks, Clara. Thank you for bringing up some of these excellent questions, which we will now discuss in a minute, but also that you refer to standardization. I wanted to point out for many of you that you probably know that eventually there will be a European Data Innovation Board that will look at how data spaces can benefit from standards, and I'm sure a lot of the work you're currently doing will have a place in there. And some of the examples you've said, which are really driven by use cases, and perhaps that is an interesting way to go. What we've seen is that the European data spaces that the Commission is supporting have started with a small road mapping, a governance structure, and some blueprint for the data space, and then really try to validate that through use cases. Where does it really matter? How do people or businesses actually use those data spaces for innovation, for new solutions? And you did mention the language, the idea of understanding each other, and I would like to then go to you, Christoph, because you talk, I know you will talk about the role of semantics and in that. So the floor is yours, Christoph Lange from Fraunhofer. Thank you.
Right, yeah. Fraunhofer has already been introduced here in several ways as the organization that gave rise to the International Data Spaces Association, and also it's our organization that coordinates the Data Spaces Support Center. Well, I will focus on specific aspects. So how can AI facilitate interoperability in data spaces? To pick up something that I learned yesterday, we are facing a socio-technical challenge here that was nicely put out in a workshop yesterday by Ana Rosa Guzman in the workshop on public sector semantic model registries. Where she said that semantic interoperability is a socio-technical challenge. I am more on the technical side here, but it has always been my motivation to enable domain experts to get the knowledge about their domains, their sectors, into data spaces and other intelligent applications. So let us see. So what are challenges related to interoperability in data spaces? First of all, it's, well, the good thing is that the need for semantic interoperability is widely understood. If otherwise, we wouldn't be so many people sitting here. But there is a critical question that I will highlight in the second half of my presentation is where is the intelligence in data spaces, or how much intelligence is there already in data spaces? So let us see. So the need for semantic interoperability, I think, is understood. I will not ask you to show your red or green cards. I will ask you in a few minutes, so have them ready. But I think that need is understood. But there are quite some technical and not so technical details that I think need further education and tooling. Let me pick examples from what is the key ingredients of, for example, what Sylvia introduced as the data space protocol, or what are the where there is a great consensus that the things that I will I will showcase are common standards, as Clara said. So in particular, JSON LD. So now a question to check whether you've been listening. So on Clara's slides, the term LD occurred several times, and who remembers what the LD in JSON LD means? Well, okay, you can cheat. It's also written on my slide. So it stands for linked data, but now comes the harder question. Now I'll show your card once more. Who would feel confident to explain to their neighbor here in the room what a JSON LD context is? Okay, well, I'm happy to see a lot of well, a majority of green cards. That's great. So now next we need to get ready to explain it to the domain experts in the various sectors, because this matters. This is not a technical detail. JSON itself is a structured data exchange format that is easy to process and widely supported, but the context is what adds semantics and interoperability by making references to ontologies, like to agreed upon semantifications of domain expertise. And the same thing, like the same buzzword or term that is, according to my experience, not yet sufficiently widely understood is we talk a lot about DCAT AP. So DCAT is a W3C standard, data catalog vocabulary, widely understood. DCAT AP, I will not ask you because you can read it here what the AP and DCAT AP means, but I think this understanding still needs to be widened and deepened. AP stands for application profile. So initially DCAT IP was an adaptation or a refinement or a constraining of DCAT to suit the needs of European public sector information and data portals. But there is more in this application profile mechanism, because you can use it to take basic fundamental standards and then tailor them to the needs of your application domain, or of your use case, or of your data space, or of your ecosystem. And thus, I think this application profile approach has a great potential to also ensure interoperability across data spaces. So the question is, how do such data models relate to intelligence, or in what way do they relate to intelligence, or in other words, what role do ontologies play? So that is, I think, open for discussion. I think today's AI mainstream and large language models, they do not replace ontologies, but we should explore how they play together with ontologies, so with explicit representations of domain knowledge. That makes the transition to intelligence. So first of all, to look back at what's been achieved already. My claim is that there could yet be a bit more intelligence in data spaces, but a lot has been achieved already by the data spaces support center and by all the activities that are being harmonized by the data spaces support center. So a lot has been done towards enabling data discovery and data exchange. And a lot has been done to build trust among participants in ecosystems, but we should not stop here. There are further steps that are to be admitted in very early stages. So how do you compose like basic services to offer more advanced, higher level, more intelligent services, smarter data apps? And to partly address the question that was raised by Carlos. So what can be done using today's AI approaches, large language models? Part of the answer is here, the rest is open for discussion. So in some of our research at Fraunhofer, we explore ways of letting large language models or intelligent chatbots help you as a new participant to a data space to find your way into the data space. like answering questions to you, such as, okay, who is in this data space? What is the communication protocol or the identity provision mechanism that is spoken and understood in this data space? Or large language models as a way of generating interoperable semantic descriptions of the data or the services that you would like to offer. This is all nice, and technically I think many of the problems will be solved in a year, but there is also something political that I would like to feed into the discussion, in that I think we need, in Europe, we need well, safe experimentation spaces for this. Because when we go deep into the semantics of the content of our data, then we will touch on sensitive things, for example, even up to personal data that I want to share in a trusted and safe way in a data space. And when experimenting with what can AI in data spaces do, I would not want to send all that data over to OpenAI. That's what I mean by safe experimentation spaces. And, well, then I think we'll have a lot to discuss.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christoph. Really excellent points there, not only because you did pick up DCAT AP, which is something that our unit is deeply involved in, and all its specificities for the different domains, but also because you have already brought to us the concept of what AI can do for interoperability, large language models to find your way to a data space, but then eventually to use AI solutions to do other things in a data space context. And I think that's a great way over to you, Harry, who has already worked on such solutions, such tools. So please share some of these insights with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be here. Now we are going to have use cases. As a company, Head AI builds text analytics platform where we apply large language models to turn any text to knowledge graphs with normalized vocabulary. We are working in context of skills, investments, medical, and defense, but today I'm talking in context of data space for skills, because we are member of Data Space for Skills. But let's go to use cases. Data Space Support Center has defined the 3 pillars of building blocks in a following way in the center. In Data Space for Skills, in the blueprint that will be soon out, we have developed personal data building blocks that are extending the Data Space Support Center building blocks. And now the challenges we are pointing out and solving are related to different categories. So first of all, semantic interoperability. We have already use cases with, for example, EU programs, World Bank, governments, and so on. And from these, if I walk through ARISA use case. ARISA is AI studies, upskilling, project funded by EU. And they wanted to understand what is the skills demand related to AI in different job roles and as a field of, well, industry in general. We can approach that via job ads. Very simple approach, but the challenge is that every country have job ads in different standard. Maybe somebody follows ESCO, somebody don't. But the problem is that in ESCO there is no AI skills, or in fact there are few, but not all. You can check yourself. Private portals are always in different formats using their own ontologies, if there is ontology. And the conversion problem is that if in one ontology is not word that is matching another ontology, you can't do conversion. That's why we apply language models to sort it out and normalize every job portal content into the words or wordings that are common in language. And so we can find out what is skills demand in AI in different roles in different countries inside EU. The supply side can be found from curriculums. We take curriculums from vocational schools, polytechnics, universities, and so we build an understanding what is trained. And believe me, they are worded once again differently than job ads. They are given out in a different structure than job ads. the fields of records are named differently. So that's why language models, once again, translating everything into similar kind of format. And yeah, we can provide what is demanded, what is supply, where are gaps, and so the project can bridge the gap, and so we have AI education hopefully tuned. When we dive a bit deeper, let's go to the meanings of the words, or in fact, when there is no words, there are just meanings. Bigger, let's say, challenge is finding words. For example, here, Business Finland is a Finnish investment organization investing on research, science, employment, and especially talent sourcing to Finland. And now what we can do with language models by normalizing skills, understanding the big lines is that in Finland there is a huge talent shortage, but it's very easy to say, difficult to describe what it really is. We turn the talent shortage into the skills based on the language models and find out the supply in Finland. And where there is gaps, we can even predict in what country there might be too much supply on the skills. So the Business Finland agency can go to those countries and do the interventions in the areas where there is enough supply that is needed in Finland. So that's why also the data normalization, conceptual understanding, because we are not speaking the same things in the same words, no matter what is written in ontology description. A bit further, in skills data space, we are dealing with personal data. CV is very, let's say, high-level personal data because most often CVs are meant to be public. But personal data, skills, psychometric factors and so on are critical, and that's why we have defined roles as a personal data intermediary. So data intermediary extended. And in personal data intermediary, we have to make sure that the personal data, when consented, the consent is limited, it must be controllable how to deal with that. We have already up and running solutions with France Visions, so that there are more than 20 partners sharing the data and enabling recommendations for job seekers, like, these are my current skills, this is my dream. And now we can use data and services for different data and service providers that we can bridge the gap between my current and my dream by saying these educations, maybe this job, these skills, and you are in your dream. But this requires trust, and that's why, yeah, the trust is the key. And diving a bit deeper with the trust, we must be also very, let's say, very secure with personal data, but we have also other data that are equally important to make secured. For example, in Finland, we have a universal military service, mandatory for men, and volunteer for women. Approximately 10% of the women do that. But during the service, people learned really valuable labor market-related skills. But the challenge is how we can tell the labor market skills in a personalized way, because not all get the same training, but in a way that we are not revealing military secrets. That's why we have developed a language model that is trained by open material, so it understands what military skills, terms, topics are said in the civilian language. And so we can convert the person's training to civilian skills and give an extended diploma with the skills. So the universities can immediately take those skills into account when continuing with the studies, or the employers can accept this as a proven skill because it's from defense forces. But this is now super important. We are not happy with semantic interoperability, but that's why we have this safeguards block, because now we must somehow be able to track that what is secure data, what is confidential, what is under privacy and GDPR. And anonymization is one thing, we can anonymize data, but it's not in the cases where we have data sets we don't want to get leaked, like defense data. Safeguards, how we make sure when data is leaked we minimize the damages. And this is the really big question. So semantic interoperability is one topic that needs to be solved, but at the same time, we have to make sure privacy, security is in that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this excellent and very hands-on example on how AI can help semantic interoperability. So with that, I think I'd like to close this first round of intro pitches with Gianfranco, who is also part of the Data Spaces Support Center from Capgemini Innovation. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andreas. I will not take too much of your time. I believe I'm clicking on the wrong place. That's it. So when Andrea asked me to contribute to this panel, I started wondering, digging back in 5 years of work on the Open Data Program, Interoperable Europe, the first data sharing program, the Support Center for Data Sharing, and now the Data Space Support Center, looking for elements that reminded me of challenges with relation to interoperability, particularly when multiple parties are working together. And I promised this is one of the first images that actually came to mind. For the ones who are visually impaired, it's useful that I take a few seconds to describe it. On the left, you see simply the gears and the springs in a, say, in a wristwatch. While on the right, you have a flock of birds flying in unison, let's say, and it's probably not the right word, in coordinated in an emergent shape, like they do in murmurations. So the question is almost natural then to ask you, that is, which of those two pictures make you more think about interoperability? So I would suggest we use the red one for the watch and the green one for the birds. Oh, nice. Cool. I'm very glad you agree with me. Oops. And I believe it's useful that I explain why I think that. Even if perhaps traditionally we like the technology aspects of interoperability, it's the one that perhaps is easier to explain, right? So we have a nice stack, the technology, the semantics, and everything. And even when we talk about organizations in data spaces, we start getting challenged. It's, by definition, they are decentralized systems with many parties coming together. We are required to be looser. We are required to be human a bit more than perhaps we can be when we have full control on a technology system. A couple of days ago, Catena X was launched officially. It's the probably most famous of the data space that have an industrial say audience already. 2 years to prepare to this moment. And one of the biggest elements of friction they experimented was bringing on board the small and medium enterprises. Not because there was no technology to do that, but just because it was difficult to incentivize them for the change. It was difficult to explain what the benefits would be of that, to make promises about how soon they will be harvesting the benefits of that. Of course, you could have threatened them that if they don't join the data space, they will be left out and they will lose business. That's not nice, though. It's not how we want to make more and better data out there and used. When researchers try to understand why starlings, those birds, do that kind of thing, they don't actually know. It's still a mystery, but there are two hypotheses. The first is that they become safer in respect to aggressors, predators. They understand that about each starling is looking at the closest 6 or 7 other birds. And the other reason is maybe that, particularly at night, doing this nice collective activity keeps them warmer in winter areas. So nobody is telling them to do this stuff. There is no governance authority here, if not perhaps their own instinct. So going then to AI and all of those applications that may improve interoperability here, my invitation to the panelists and to the people in the audience is not to forget the human element of this, those elements of incentivization, those elements of motivating why we are doing this and the benefit that is there for you. And then the technology will be sorted out in some way. And as a techie, as a management consultant in the room, I feel a bit strange saying that, but yeah, that's my suggestion for the panel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is really an excellent way to start maybe a short discussion because of time limitations, but still it's a great way to move into perhaps a first question to you. We did hear about the importance of interoperability, the importance of semantic interoperability for the data spaces and between data spaces, and we briefly touched upon how AI could actually help. How do you see the role of AI? And we definitely need to look at the personal element, the safety and security of personal data, and perhaps also safe, whoever said that, safe, you, Christoph, safe places to experiment, such as sandboxes and so on. What kind of solutions do you already know, or how do you see this going forward? How AI-enabled solutions could help the interoperability essentially between data spaces? Anyone that would like to come in?
Well, I don't know exactly solutions, but I know, or I can figure out how artificial intelligence could help. So I'm thinking, for example, I have said before that it could be ideally nice to have a common agreement on the standards, on data models, on APIs in order to be interoperable by nature, by like the birds. But if not, perhaps artificial intelligence could support in the translation or convergence of these different models and APIs. So in this way, the selection of the data model or the API could be transparent for the user. So it could be made by the artificial intelligence solution. You just need to express which is your need, which is your requirement, and then the machine gives you the answer, which data model you should use or which API you should better fit into your needs. So this could be a possible application of API, in my opinion.
May I add to that, Clara? There's one element to consider is that we don't need to expect AI to come up with everything, right? So there still is a lot of work done by humans, including the Data Spaces Support Center, just to drop one name there. So something, we've got many of the aspects of the project so far from the panelists. Something we are doing is something called a blueprint. This is the actual collection of all of the technology elements, software components that we think are suitable and let's say in line with the European values and secure, the combination of business models that have been reviewed, the language even, the glossary to describe them. So I personally expect AI to be used on top of it in a way, to generate what is missing, not in a way too creative or hallucinatory, but let's say creative and assistive. And that would be the natural way for me, in a way, to expect AI to contribute here.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I see you all have some ideas. I don't know, maybe Harry, then you or Christoph, go ahead. I think you were first to hold your mic.
Christoph? Okay, yeah, so to pick up these points, I think, well, there are some tedious tasks around data spaces that I could indeed facilitate. So one more example would be to initially set up a data space when you start in the small, and when it's not, let's say, your ambition to join a big already established data space. Sometimes you need something small and specific, and then of course, the blueprint of the Data Spaces Support Center will give guidance, like what building blocks to choose, but still there is a linguistic bridge to gap, a gap to be bridged, possibly by AI, to the languages of domain experts in various sectors. And in a similar way, I could also imagine AI to facilitate interoperability across data spaces, because at the moment this is still quite limited. So when you set up a data space, as of today, you have to make a choice. Will I build it on, let's say, IDS, Gaia X, or Fireware technology? They have similarities and compatibilities, but I think there is still something to be done.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Carlos.
Yes. I believe that perhaps generative AI or large language models is a new paradigm. That's different technology, because you have talked about how AI can help to solve technical problems, but perhaps the solution is different. at the end, perhaps we don't want to exchange data, we want to exchange informations. And perhaps I need only to ask an entry point with all the security, with all the conditions to access, that mix my prompt, my questions, with the information that is in the other part, and return me an answer that I can understand, without think about the semantic, the syntactic interoperability. I believe that's a new way that's open to us and that we need to study. It's not a solution now, but I believe that is something that we need to have in mind.
Excellent, great. Harry?
Yeah, and then we take a poll. I assume everyone has tried ChatGPT, but how many of you have put your personal information to ChatGPT to test what it says about you? Green, yes, red, no. Very good. Most of them don't, but there are some greens. Then the real question. How many of you have put your friends, spouses, employees, students' information to ChatGPT, personal data? All right, I recommend not to do that, because then you violate GDPR. When you train such APIs, like OpenAI stuff, what you put there ends up to language model. And you can get it out of there. GDPR is not counted. When something goes to language model, it's not out. Okay, then what we have to understand. Currently we are talking large language models as something that only Google, OpenAI and well, big players do have. But the reality is that there are hundreds of large language models and thousands of smaller focused language models. And when we are in data space context, we have to make sure what language model we can use for a specific purposes. Because if you use language models that are meant to, well, get every information possible into the language model, every information ends up there. And it's not always the best way because it's illegal in Europe side. And that's something we quite often forget when we are that, ooh, AI, ooh, AI. There is no one AI. There are tens of thousands of different AI applications, hundreds of base models, and quite many are EU legislation compliant, but not OpenAI.
Thank you. Excellent comment. Silvia?
Yes, I want to add, in addition to that was being commented, I see that AI can support on the implementation of data governance regarding the implementation of policies and rules. This is a great challenge when we are talking about data usage control to implement the data sovereignty, to be able to enforce the policies, the rules that we implement. Some of them coming from regulations, from European regulations, but also national and sectorial regulations. As an example, I have seen a demonstrator of a drone that is flying around a building, and there is a cross-border of the country with different rules in each country regarding the height of the drone, and then automatically fulfill, when changed from one country to other, fulfill the rule of the country that is. So I think that the AI can support on implementing it on data spaces.
Excellent. Christoph, you would like to come in?
Yes, to pick up the points about usage contracts and data usage policies you made, that is, I think there is a great potential for AI, because today's state of the art in data spaces is that you can express you as a data provider, you can express the usage policy attached to your data in a formal, semantic, machine comprehensible way. And there are also technical ways of enforcing that data is used according to this policy. However, most of the contract negotiation is still in a take it or leave it way. And there is not yet that much of a dynamic and well, on par negotiation. And with that, well, negotiation of a contract is communication, is language, so I think AI could do a lot there.
Thank you. Thanks. Excellent ideas, and I hope you picked up some of those, because I know among you there are many academics, and I hope I do a bit of a promotion. We have the seasonal school on interoperability, which we usually do once a year, and I really hope that some of you will pick up these ideas to look into how AI could help interoperability, especially of data spaces, semantic interoperability. And I know we're coming close to the end, so I'd just like to close with one question to you all. We're coming very soon to a new commission, and the current commission has put in place, obviously, the legislation and policies for the creation of the data spaces. How do you think the next commission, or what could the commission do for the next period with the data spaces to ensure this interoperability and interconnection of data spaces? Try to be brief so that we do close on time. I don't know, we'll go from, I don't know, Gianfranco.
I can start if you like. As a management consultant, I'm privileged to hear a lot of opinion from my clients. And if there is one thing that comes up often talking about data strategy is a request for continuity. Everybody is scared that with the new commission, perhaps something else becomes important or hype, and we drastically bend towards the new topic. What we're doing with data spaces is not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? It will take years, in a good way, before the common European data spaces deepen their roots and start providing value consistently and sustainably. So, Commission, please don't get distracted by the latest funky technology and help us keeping working for a while at least on this line.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of challenges still in front of us. I would like to remark that I will distinguish, or I will continue distinguishing between the two aspects of data spaces, which one is technical for sure, because we need to find the best way to be interoperable, if we do it within the data space, across data spaces, how to federate these data spaces, federation of terms, of APIs and so on. But another one is non-technical, so we need still to be focused on which is the motivation of being a data space, when a data space is required, how it should be governed, how it should be deployed and operated. So I could keep the path in the distinction of these two dimensions of the data space.
Carlos.
Yes, I agree with Clara that this is a long-term race, that perhaps the main problems are not the technical problems, that at the end we are going to achieve a solution, that are to create these business needs, this community that boost the data space concepts. And perhaps in a technical way, we would like to see that all the different initiatives that we have to build this data space at the end converge, and we have, yes, I believe that's not possible to have a universal recipe to do the data space, but to have clear guidelines how to do it.
Thank you. Christoph.
Yeah, I would like to put once more on the wish list the need for like safe and trusted ways of talking to AI in the context of data spaces. Like when I am about to share in a data space a personal or otherwise sensitive data, to put up your analogy, I want to be able to talk without regrets to a chatbot about my personally sensitive information or about personally sensitive or trusted information by my spouse or my employer, telling the chatbot I have my spouse's or my employer's consent.
Excellent, thank you. Silvia.
Regarding interoperability in data spaces, for example, we need more support on identifying or deploying use cases to test interoperability between different data spaces, for example, in the same sector. We have the first implementation on energy data spaces, but the next steps is to test with real use cases the interoperability between sectors and also cross-border. So we need use cases and also, as commented before, business models to deploying. And the last one is to develop what the DSSC has the mission, and we need then to implement the federation of data spaces. Okay, that you enter in one data space, but then you can interoperate with the different ones.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, and I continue with business models. Like EU, as well as private sector, has invested quite much already in data spaces. So there must be market-driven business models in order to someday receive return for the investments. And that's quite important message.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this excellent panel. And before closing, I kind of reflected on this being the second session in a SEMIC context to talk about data spaces. So I'm taking away a new idea that this session is SEMIC, but it's actually sustainable exchange of meaningful data for innovation and collaboration. So with that, I really hope to discuss it again in a next SEMIC conference and obviously in all other occasions. Please give a big round of applause to the panelists who have shared with us some wonderful insights. Thank you.